Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there is this comforting expectation of, well, of precision.
Right. It's very clinical.
Exactly. It is like engineering. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line right there on the film, and the doctor just points to it and says, there it is. There is the problem.
It's undeniable.
Yeah, but when you step into the world of industrial safety and specifically into the realm of human behavior within heavy industry, suddenly that x-ray machine is just broken.
Oh, completely broken.
We are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is, quite honestly, murky. And it is a murkiness that has direct life or death consequences. I want you to just pause for a second, wherever you are listening to this, and imagine a number. 900.
Yeah.
That is how many people are killed at work globally every single day.
It is a staggering figure to try and wrap your head around. When you extrapolate that daily toll out across the calendar, you are looking at roughly 330,000 deaths a year. Yeah, 330,000 deaths resulting from workplace accidents. That is an official estimate from the International Labor Organization, and it represents this massive daily ongoing tragedy that most of us walking down the street or, sitting in an office simply do not see.
330,000 people who pack their lunch, go to their shift, and just do not go home at the end of the day.
Exactly.
It is completely unacceptable. And tackling that brings us to the mission of our deep dive today. We are looking at a brand new press release that just dropped today, August 26, 2026, from a company called EON AI Ventures.
Right.
They're launching a new initiative called the Work Intelligence Fellowship. And their proposed solution to this global crisis involves an incredibly unexpected combination of artificial intelligence and, well, college students.
Which is quite the pairing.
Right.
Frankly.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because on the surface, combining bleeding-edge AI, heavy industrial safety protocols, and a bunch of undergrads sounds like a typo in a corporate memo.
It really does. It sounds like someone made a mistake.
Yeah. But as we dig into the root causes of these workplace accidents, the underlying logic actually starts to become incredibly clear.
Right, because to really understand the solution they're bringing to the table, we first have to understand the true nature of the problem they're trying to solve. If we look at the oil and gas sector, for example, which is a highly regulated, high-stakes environment where safety is supposedly paramount, the data tells a very specific, surprising story.
Which is?
More than 70% of accidents in that sector are not caused by a machine breaking down.
Really? 70%?
Yes, over 7 in 10 of these accidents involve a human or an organizational cause. They aren't equipment failures.
Which completely flips the script on how we usually picture industrial accidents in our heads. I mean, we always picture a rusty pressure valve bursting or a crane cable snapping under too much weight.
Exactly, the Hollywood version.
Right, but you're saying the hardware, the heavy machinery is usually functioning exactly as designed. It is the software, meaning us, the human beings operating the site, that fails.
Yes. The source material highlights 3 incredibly common yet entirely preventable scenarios that illustrate this perfectly. First, you have a procedure that was meticulously written down in a safety manual somewhere, signed off by a committee, but was never actually practiced by the crew standing on the ground.
Ah, so it looks great on paper.
Perfect on paper, useless in reality. Second, you have a critical piece of operational expertise that literally walked out the door when a senior employee retired.
Oh, the brain drain.
Right. That deeply specialized knowledge was never properly transferred to the junior staff taking over. And third, you have administrative gaps. For example, a work permit that was officially issued for a site, but simply didn't cover the entire expanding scope of the job that was actually being performed that day.
So they are doing work they aren't technically cleared for.
Exactly. These aren't mysterious acts of God or unpredictable mechanical quirks. They are well-documented, human, and organizational disconnects.
It is essentially like having the perfect recipe written down in a 5-star cookbook. The recipe itself is flawless, but the chef in the kitchen is swapping out ingredients, skipping the required resting time for the dough, and cranking up the oven temperature because they are rushed during a busy dinner service.
Well, that's a perfect analogy. The recipe didn't fail, the execution of it did.
But here's my pushback on this. If the safety industry already knows these causes so well, and the source actually notes that there are 7 causes that are documented and deeply familiar to every safety professional out there, why haven't they fixed it? I mean, if we know exactly how the chef is ruining the dish, why are we still serving bad food?
What's fascinating here is the distinction between knowing a theory and actually capturing reality. Dan Lajurscore, the founder and chairman of EON AI Ventures, makes a brilliant point about this gap. He notes that what is missing in the industry isn't the list of causes. We have the list.
We know the 7 culprits.
Right. What is utterly scarce is first-hand, structured evidence of how these causes keep recurring inside actual working operations. Think about a traditional safety system on an oil rig or a factory floor. It is incredibly good at recording when a digital sensor trips or when a physical machine fails.
Sure, it logs the data point.
Exactly. But it has absolutely no mechanism to record honest conversations about how work is actually being planned in the break room, how risk is being judged in the heat of the moment, and how the job is genuinely executed when the safety inspector isn't looking.
Because humans are messy. And humans are very good at covering their tracks. I mean, if I'm taking a shortcut at work because I'm under immense pressure to save time, and an auditor in a hard hat with a clipboard comes around asking questions about my workflow, I'm going to give them the textbook answer.
Of course you are.
Yeah, I'm going to smile and recite the manual back to them verbatim.
Because your livelihood might depend on it. You get a defensive, prepackaged answer. You are certainly not going to tell the corporate auditor that you skip step 4 every Tuesday, because step 4 takes too long and the regional manager is breathing down your neck to meet a production quota.
No way. That's a fast track to getting fired.
Right. So the company continues to operate with a massive, dangerous blind spot. They have terabytes of data on their machines and almost zero reliable data on their actual human behavior. They desperately need ground-level, unfiltered truth.
Which creates this massive gaping hole in the enterprise data. And that missing puzzle piece, the desperate need for honest, on-the-ground intelligence about how humans are actually behaving, leads us right into the most surprising part of this whole press release. Who is actually going out to get this honest data?
The college students.
Yes. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because EON AI Ventures isn't sending in former FBI interrogators or seasoned 60-year-old industry veterans. They are sending in college students.
The first cohort of this Work Intelligence Fellowship officially kicks off in September 2026. It involves 24 students drawn from 9 North American universities. The source explicitly mentions programs at Purdue, Boston University, Wisconsin, Ontario Tech, and Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and the students span 10 different degree programs.
Okay, I have to admit, when I first read that, my immediate reaction was, are you kidding? Why would you send a 20-year-old college student to investigate serious, sometimes fatal industrial failures?
It does sound counterintuitive.
It sounds wild. Isn't that a bit like sending a college sophomore who is interning for the summer to process a complex, multi-layered crime scene? It feels like they would be completely out of their depth, standing in a refinery asking questions they don't have the context for.
It is a completely natural reaction, but it misses the psychological brilliance of the approach. Look back to your example of the corporate auditor with the clipboard. Dan Lajurscore points out that if a software vendor or a corporate executive asks a site safety manager what actually happens on a bad shift, walls immediately go up.
Right, because I am trying to protect my job.
Exactly. There is a commercial threat or a professional threat to their job security. But a student asking a safety manager what actually happens on the ground gets a radically different response.
Because there is zero threat attached to that interaction.
Precisely. The psychological dynamic completely shifts. The hardened professional on the other side of the table suddenly falls into a mentoring role.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, they want to help the student understand the gritty reality of the industry, rather than the polished corporate version. The data they share belongs to academic research, not a sales pitch, and not a performance review. It disarms the natural defensiveness that has actively hidden this behavioral data for decades.
Wait, if I'm a worker and I suddenly realize this student's data is being fed into some massive AI system of record, aren't I going to worry that this AI is eventually going to be used by corporate to discipline me? I mean, even if I like the student, I don't want my honest confession about skipping a step to get me fired a month later.
That is precisely why the architecture of the data collection is so strictly controlled. The data is anonymized and aggregated at the sector level.
Okay, so it strips my name off it.
Right. It is not about catching Bob in Sector 4 taking a shortcut on a Tuesday. It is about recognizing that 80% of all workers across multiple sites in Sector 4 are taking the exact same shortcut.
Oh.
And if that is happening, the system identifies that the procedure itself is fundamentally broken or unrealistic, not the individual workers. It shifts the blame from the human to the system design.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It depersonalizes it. So once these students manage to get these honest confessions and insights from the safety managers, What do they actually do with it? They can't just hand a massive corporation a spiral notebook full of dorm room scribbles.
Right. They have to structure it rigorously. That is why they compile these interviews into what EON calls sector evidence packs.
Sector evidence packs. Got it.
The students are working to a strictly defined academic brief under the supervision of their university. They aren't just wandering around a facility asking random, open-ended questions. They conduct highly structured interviews with operations, safety, and training professionals.
It's very targeted.
Very targeted. And importantly, they only focus on one of those 7 known causes of failure. They aren't trying to solve the entire industry's problems at once. They are taking a very specific slice of the pie and going deep.
And to make sure things stay on track from a business perspective, the press release notes that every single student team is paired with a named EON business development partner. This partner supervises the scope of the project and handles any professional escalations.
Yeah, they provide that safety net.
But the rules for the students themselves are incredibly rigid. They are not employees of EON, they are not paid, they absolutely do not sell any products, and they are forbidden from discussing commercial terms.
They also have a strict disclosure rule. The students have to explicitly identify their sponsor, EON AI Ventures, and the specific academic purpose of the research in the very first sentence of any interaction.
Oh, wow. Right up front.
Yes, this is a condition of participation, not a mere guideline. Nobody gets to bend that rule, which is vital for maintaining the integrity of the research and the trust of the industry professionals they're interviewing.
But if you are listening to this right now, you are probably asking the same massive question I am. We are talking about rigorous, unpaid, highly supervised academic research. In today's economy, where everyone is hustling just to pay rent and buy groceries, why would a college student volunteer to do this?
That's a fair question.
I mean, what is actually in it for them? Because it sounds like a massive amount of heavy lifting for $0.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the harsh reality of the job market for recent graduates in the fall of 2026. The source brings in some highly sobering data from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York for the second quarter of this year.
Yeah, it's not looking great.
It's really not. Unemployment for recent college graduates is currently sitting at roughly 5.6%. But the truly alarming statistic, the one that defines this generation's struggle, is the underemployment rate.
Which refers to graduates who are working in jobs that do not require their specific degree.
Exactly.
You spend 4 years getting a specialized engineering degree, but you end up working the cash register at a retail store or doing basic, mindless data entry just to survive.
That underemployment rate is at a staggering 42%.
42%.
Nearly half of recent graduates are not utilizing their expensive, hard-earned educations. Anna Lajerskar, the executive vice president of EON AI Ventures, captures the frustration of this demographic perfectly.
What'd she say?
She notes that every student she meets wants to work on something that actually matters, but they simply cannot get their foot in the door. They don't need another classroom lecture. They don't need more theory. What they lack is something concrete to point at in a job interview.
I really love that phrasing, something concrete to point at. Because when you are sitting in a high-stakes interview and the hiring manager asks for your real-world experience, you can't just slide your GPA across the table.
No, that won't cut it.
You need a narrative. You need to be able to say, you know, I interviewed 30 senior safety managers in the oil and gas sector to identify procedural breakdowns, and I presented my findings to a corporate board. That fundamentally changes the entire conversation.
It absolutely does.
So this whole program is essentially built on a win-win-win architecture.
Let's break down those 3 distinct wins, which exist regardless of whether any commercial transaction ever takes place. For the students, as we discussed, they get direct named contact with senior industry professionals. They're building a Rolodex at the highest levels of real operators.
That's huge.
And at the end of the fellowship, they get a tangible reference letter detailing the actual high-stakes work they performed.
That is win number 1. Then for the universities, the second win is that they get a real corporate client with a real meaningful brief entirely at no cost to the institution or the students. It elevates their senior capstone programs from theoretical, hypothetical exercises to real-world, life-saving problem solving.
Exactly. And the third win is for the heavy industry itself. These oil and gas and manufacturing companies finally receive that priceless, unbiased evidence about their most persistent, deadly failures.
The stuff they couldn't get with the clipboard auditor.
Precisely. And they get it gathered by people who have absolutely no product to sell them. They get the honest answers they've been fruitlessly seeking for decades.
Now, to be completely clear on who is orchestrating all of this behind the scenes, we should look briefly at EON AI Ventures. Because if you're going to launch a global program dealing with workplace fatalities and industrial safety, you need a certain pedigree.
You really do.
Yeah, you can't just be a shiny new startup operating out of a garage that incorporated last Tuesday.
No. And EON is highly established in this space. They have 25 years of deep experience in immersive learning and industrial training. They boast over 4,400 institutional customers spanning across more than 80 countries.
Wow.
They're headquartered in Irvine, California, and they have the robust infrastructure to actually process the data these students are gathering.
Let's actually dig into that infrastructure for a second, because this is where the press release gets pretty dense. They use terms like work intelligence or WI, which they call the enterprise's missing system of record. They also throw around platforms like One System Human 2.0 as their grand vision, and something called the intelligence flywheel as their engine.
A lot of jargon.
Right, a lot of corporate jargon. Let's cut through that for a minute.
Yeah.
How does an algorithm actually use a college student's interview notes? I mean, what does an intelligence flywheel actually mean in this context?
Think of a literal mechanical flywheel. It is a heavy wheel that takes a lot of effort to start spinning, but once it does, it builds momentum and stores energy, powering a system continuously over time.
Okay, I can picture that.
In this specific case, the students are providing that initial push. They feed the raw, honest behavioral data, the true confessions of the safety managers, into the work intelligence system. The AI acts as the engine.
Okay.
It analyzes thousands of these structured interviews to spot hidden risks and behavioral patterns that human safety managers completely missed.
So the AI is looking across all this messy human data and saying, hey, wait a minute, workers across 12 different sites are all skipping step 4 when it rains.
Precisely. Once the AI identifies that hidden pattern, the company can update its safety protocols to reflect reality, rather than just pointing to a dusty manual.
Right.
That creates a safer environment, which in turn yields new, better behavioral data, which feeds back into the system. This spins a flywheel faster, making the AI smarter and more predictive with every single rotation. It perfectly bridges the gap between cold, hard machine logs and messy human reality.
So what does this all mean? We have covered a massive amount of ground today, from a horrifying daily death toll of 900 workers, to the psychology of corporate audits, to the desperate, underemployed job market for the graduating class of 2026, and finally to the mechanics of an AI flywheel. How do we tie this all together?
I think the core takeaway lies squarely in the middle of our current cultural conversation around artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Right now, AI is facing intense, completely justified scrutiny. People are asking very hard, very fair questions about what this technology is ultimately for.
Yeah. Is it just a tool to generate cheap marketing copy?
Right. Or is it designed purely to replace human jobs and cut costs? Is it just a flashy novelty?
Or, as we often see in the headlines, is it just another sophisticated surveillance tool to monitor workers?
Exactly. There is deep, widespread skepticism. But what EON AI Ventures is doing here is offering a very specific, highly testable counter-narrative to that skepticism. They are taking this immense computational power and pointing it at a problem where the ultimate measure of success isn't just increased profit margins, it is human lives saved.
Wow.
They are using AI to try and reduce that number of 900 daily workplace deaths. And they are doing it with radical transparency. The research is done in the open, the corporate sponsors are fully disclosed in the very first sentence of every interview, and the students' actual names are right there on the research.
It's a genuinely refreshing departure from the idea of AI as this secretive black box technology operating in the shadows of a server farm somewhere. Here, the process is completely out in the daylight, addressing a deeply human, deeply physical problem.
And that leads to a final thought that I think is really worth mulling over long after this deep dive ends. In the accompanying white paper they released today, which is titled 3 Shortages, 1 Mechanism, EON AI Ventures does something you almost never see in the tech world.
Oh, what's that?
They actually spell out the explicit conditions under which they would conclude this fellowship program has not worked.
Wait, they proactively publish their own criteria for failure before the first cohort of students has even stepped foot onto a site.
They did.
That is wild.
And I invite you to think about how incredibly rare that is in today's landscape. How often do major tech companies launch a highly ambitious AI initiative and proactively publish the exact metrics by which they will admit defeat?
Never. It almost never happens.
It forces us to ask a really compelling question. What would the technology industry look like if this kind of radical transparency, where predefined failure metrics are established and published from day one, became the standard rather than the rare exception?
That is a phenomenal question. It changes the entire dynamic of accountability in the tech sector. If you publish how you can fail, you are forced to be honest about how you succeed. And that brings us right back to where we started today. We talked about how diagnosing human error in the workplace is like looking at a broken X-ray machine, muddy waters, hidden behaviors, people smiling and covering their tracks for the auditor.
The human element is, and always will be, inherently messy.
It is, but maybe this approach is how you finally start to fix that broken diagnostic machine. Not by building a slightly better digital sensor to monitor a pressure valve, but by realizing that the most critical, most complex, and most unpredictable piece of machinery on any job site is the human being.
Well said.
And the only way to truly understand a human being isn't through a clipboard audit. It's through an honest conversation. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Work Intelligence Fellowship. Keep questioning the data, keep looking for the human element behind the numbers, and we will see you next time.